Hello, I am Anna Woods with AL Woods LLC. I am a certified life and grief coach, and I am here today with Paula Collins. We are going to talk about grief and grief recovery, the outreach program that Paula attended in 2021. So Paula, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate your willingness to share.
Thank you for having me. I'm Paula Collins. I am a mom, of course, and a registered nurse.
Wonderful. So Paula, can you tell us about your journey through grief recovery? What brought you to grief recovery? Kind of a twofold question.
Okay. So I originally came to you because my daughter had passed away. And I just needed something to help me unfold some of the feelings, just that journey. And so that's why I came to you.
Okay. So with that, Paula, as you went through the grief recovery program, can you tell the audience and really share with me some of the greatest fears you had coming into grief recovery? What are some of the things that you were hesitant about through grief recovery? Or was there anything you were hesitant about?
I don't really think I was hesitant. I think I didn't really know what to expect.
Okay.
That was the bigger thing. I think being the fact that I am a nurse and you're taught how to go through what we call the grieving process, which is really more the dying process, and learning that grieving and dying and the grieving process and the dying process are two different things, was kind of an eye-opener. And so I think that was the biggest thing that I learned.
Yeah, let me just speak to that for just a second. So Paula stated that the grieving process and the dying process are two different things. That's one of the key components as we move through grief recovery, is to be able to identify what grief really is. So grief is a normal and natural response to emotional loss of any kind, and it's not about the death and dying process. There's a popular book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross that speaks about death and dying, and it's very often confused with grief. Grief has no stages. So thank you, Paula. That was a great point to share.
Right.
So how did the Grief Recovery Outreach Program, how did it help you?
So it really helped me to unpack, like you said, the emotions and understanding the emotions and knowing that the emotions are real, they're normal. Try not to put them aside, but really deal with them and to be able to speak about them and not feel, sometimes when a person passes away, you feel, or other people feel like, don't talk about it, or grieve for a little bit and that's it. But grief is not that way.
Yeah.
Grief just, it just sneaks up on you sometimes.
Yeah.
You could have a great day one day and an absolute horrible day the next day. You can have a great day one moment and a horrible moment, the next time. Anything could trigger grief. Cleaning a room, hearing a song, a scent, a memory, anything could cause that to actually fester inside of you. And you have to really understand that grief is normal.
Yes, grief is normal, and the reactions that you have or had to those moments that occur, they're very real. And so what I would encourage, and I continue to encourage, is when we have those moments to simply acknowledge that you're having that moment.
Right.
In fact, I was telling Paula earlier that I had that moment driving home last night where I thought, my mom's gone, my dad's gone, my kids are not around, and all those are grieving experiences. So I paused, I acknowledged the emotion that I was feeling, and then I was able to move forward. The challenge becomes, if we don't acknowledge those emotions, we simply just shut them down.
Right.
We suppress those.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that thought.
If I may, I thought about when my daughter first passed. I used to go into the grocery stores, and I didn't know why. I mean, you shop all the time, but I would go in the grocery store and just the tears would just start to flow, and I would go down a certain aisle and the tears would start to flow, and I didn't understand that. I really honestly didn't. And it was because of you to say, stop, think, what's going on, what happened. I was able to say, why I feel that way is because I had to get her applesauce because she couldn't eat, certain foods, and I had to make sure that there were foods that was easier for her to be able to get down and to hold on to. And so it was that, those moments that, oh, okay, I understand now why when I do something as simple as going grocery shopping, I fall apart. and it was happening, so frequently. I would get to the register, go to pay for my food, and just start crying. And the cashier would say, what's wrong? And I would say, well, I just lost my daughter. And yeah, it was because I just lost my daughter,
right.
But it was also because I had a memory that was attached to that.
Yes.
And if you don't really pay attention to that, if you don't, look and say what happened, what's causing this, you think something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Why am I in this grocery store crying?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's really about, the memory and what was happening at the time that I was there.
Yeah. So part of what happens in grief is that we have these memories of our loved ones, and oftentimes we experience things that trigger that memory, and that is normal and natural response to the emotional loss that you've experienced. And it's very important to know the why, right? And to acknowledge, I feel sad today, or every time I go to the grocery store, I cry because I have this memory of my daughter. But also we acknowledge the wonderful memories that we have of our loved ones, and place those as a priority as we go through the grieving process. I also like to add that as we talk about the emotions of grief, I kind of want to talk about how those emotions come at us, right? So one minute we're happy, the next minute we're sad. It's kind of a roller coaster of emotions. And so I liken that to being at an aquarium and the fish is coming at you, and from a distance the fish is beautiful, but the closer you get, the more scary it becomes, right? So then the nerves kick up, and all those things happen. The fish swims back off, your emotions go back to such a normal pace. So grief is very much the same way. Waves come in at us, it's exciting, waves go out, we calm down. So to know that those emotions are both normal and natural. The challenge is we're not taught how to give up things, but we're certainly taught how to obtain things, right? So grief becomes one of those emotions that we're not even taught to deal with. So Paul, as you think about your time through grief recovery and the time we spent coaching as well, what has been some of the greatest lessons that you've been able to apply to your life currently?
I think speaking out, speaking those feelings, being able to say when I'm in a tizzy, as I would call it, when I'm in a tizzy, I'm able to say, this is what's going on, and not feel bad about it. Just to know that it's okay. It's not going to stay like this forever. It's just for that short period of time, and then it's going to be okay. But I think, we're taught not to talk about it. We're taught not to have feelings about it. In other cultures, death is a celebration. It's something that goes on and on, maybe a year or so, where they continually do rituals for that person's life. Here in the US, it's they pass, you have a service, get on with life. And so it's hard to kind of just get on with life when you still have that emotional bond or that emotional trauma, because it is a trauma that you still have to deal with. So I think being in the program allowed me to be able to speak up and say, no, this is what I'm feeling, this is why I'm feeling it. I'll be okay. I'm not going to stay like this forever. No one stays like this forever. I've had so many friends within the last 6 to 8 months who have lost loved ones, lost their own children, and I see and I watch and I say, it's going to be okay. I know it's going to be okay, because it's okay. It's all right to be sad. It's okay to miss them, but it's going to be okay. Just keep moving. Just keep moving.
Sounds like you have become an advocate for grief recovery. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That happens. And I will add that as we wrap up our chat this morning, that I became certified as a grief recovery specialist and also a life coach over the past 5 years. And the reason for that was due to my own personal loss, my mom and my dad, but also children moving off to college, retirement, things that happen at church that are painful for us. So there's many different faces of grief that go unrecognized. So I myself had to work through those things, and in return wanted to share this passion of helping others through grief recovery. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we conclude our chat this morning?
Absolutely. I think the other thing, you had actually just mentioned it, there are other forms of grief. So it's not just about someone passing, but there's the grief of not getting the right job. There's a grief of losing a job that you love.
Yeah.
There's a grief of divorcing. There's a grief of, there's just so many different things that you actually grieve. And you don't realize it until you're in such a program as the Grief Recovery to say, oh, wow, that was grief.
Yep.
So I did actually learn a lot, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
So thank you. So that's it for now. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Paula, for sharing in your experience. And let's keep talking. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.